15. Black child actors who disappeared and you didn't know about. What happens when Hollywood makes you famous before you're even old enough to understand fame and then suddenly stops calling Gary Coleman, Jamie Foxworth, Ralph Carter, Emmanuel Lewis, and other unforgettable black child stars once appeared in millions of homes with futures that seemed limitless. But when childhood ended, the spotlight changed. Some struggled to find adult roles, some walked away, and others built completely different lives beyond the cameras. Today, Golden Black Legends looks back at 15 black child stars whose journeys after fame may surprise you. Stay until the end, because several stories are not what the rumors claimed. Subscribe to Golden Black Legends and comment below which forgotten child star do you still remember most. Gary Coleman. Gary Coleman was once one of the most recognizable child stars in America. Born in Illinois in 1968, he entered television while still very young, but behind the infectious smile was a childhood complicated by serious health problems. A congenital kidney condition required extensive treatment, including kidney transplants, and contributed to his adult height of about 4 feet 8 inches. Yet when Different Strokes premiered in 1978, none of that stopped Coleman from becoming its breakout star. As Arnold Jackson, his comic timing and unforgettable delivery turned him into a television phenomenon. At the height of the show's popularity, Coleman was earning extraordinary money for a child performer and became closely identified with the catchphrase, "What you talkin' 'bout, Willis?" But when Different Strokes ended in 1986, the transition to adult stardom proved painfully difficult. The face America had adored as a child was so closely tied to Arnold that finding substantial new roles became increasingly challenging. Then came an even harsher discovery. Coleman learned that much of the fortune generated during his childhood career was gone. He eventually sued his parents and former business advisor over the handling of his earnings and won millions in damages, yet financial problems followed him into adulthood. By 1999, the former television superstar had filed for bankruptcy. At different points, he also worked as a security guard while continuing occasional television appearances. His health remained fragile. In May 2010, Coleman was hospitalized after a fall at his Utah home and suffered an intracranial hemorrhage. He died on May 28 at only 42. Gary Coleman's story remains one of child television's most bittersweet transformations. A boy once recognized almost everywhere eventually struggled to escape the character that had made him famous. His life raises an uncomfortable question when Hollywood creates a child superstar who protects that child when the spotlight moves on. Jamie Foxworth. Jamie Foxworth became famous before she was old enough to understand how quickly Hollywood could change its mind. Born in 1979, she began modeling as a young child and appeared in commercials before landing the role that would define her early career, Judy Winslow, the youngest daughter of Carl and Harriet, on Family Matters. When the sitcom premiered in 1989, Foxworth was still a child, surrounded by a television family that millions of Americans welcomed into their homes every week. But as Steve Urkel grew into the show's breakout character, Judy's presence diminished. After 4 seasons, Foxworth disappeared from the series without her character receiving a meaningful on-screen explanation. For viewers, it was strangely abrupt. One of the Winslow children was simply no longer there. The years that followed were far more complicated than the cheerful sitcom image audiences remembered. Foxworth struggled to establish another mainstream acting career and later spoke publicly about personal and financial difficulties. As a young adult, she entered the adult entertainment industry under another name and also experienced substance abuse problems. Years later, she appeared on Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew, bringing parts of that difficult period into public view. Yet reducing her entire life to those years would repeat the same mistake that sensationalized child star stories often make. Foxworth became a mother in 2009 and moved into a different chapter of adulthood. Her story is not simply about scandal, it is about what can happen when childhood fame disappears before a young performer has built an identity outside the camera. Today, Jamie Foxworth remains one of television's most memorable examples of a character and young actress vanishing from a hugely successful sitcom almost overnight. For longtime Family Matters viewers, the unanswered question still lingers. What might Jamie Foxworth's career have looked like if Judy Winslow had been allowed to grow up on screen? Ralph Carter. Before millions knew Ralph Carter as Michael Evans, on Good Times, he had already proven himself on one of America's toughest stages. Born in New York City in 1961, Carter began performing professionally as a child and appeared on Broadway at only 9 years old. His theatrical career eventually led to Raisin, the musical adaptation of Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. His performance earned him a Tony Award nomination in 1974. Then television changed everything. That same decade, Carter became Michael Evans, the youngest son of Florida and James Evans on Good Times. From 1974 to 1979, viewers watched Michael grow from an outspoken child into an increasingly politically conscious teenager. In a sitcom centered on a working-class black family in Chicago, Michael often became the voice questioning inequality and demanding something better. Carter's popularity even produced a recording career. During the 1970s, he released music including When You're Young and In Love as producers explored his potential as a teenage recording star. But when Good Times ended, Carter did not follow the familiar path toward Hollywood movie stardom. His screen appearances became increasingly scarce, rather than suffering the dramatic secret downfall described in many forgotten star stories. Carter largely shifted away from mainstream television and maintained connections to theater. Recent retrospectives likewise describe him as having retreated from television toward stage work. That distinction matters. Ralph Carter was not mysteriously erased, and there is no need to invent humiliating auditions or secret tragedies to make his story compelling. The fascinating truth is simply one of the most recognizable black television children of the 1970s stepped away from the kind of celebrity many assumed would follow him forever. More than 5 decades after Good Times premiered, Michael Evans remains instantly recognizable even to viewers who may barely know the name Ralph Carter. Brandon Quintin Adams. For children growing up around the late 1980s and early 1990s, Brandon Quintin Adams seemed to appear everywhere. Born in 1979, Adams began working extremely young, appearing in commercials before establishing himself as one of the era's recognizable black child performers. His early credits eventually placed him alongside one of the biggest entertainers on earth, Michael Jackson. Adams appeared in Jackson's Moonwalker portraying Zeke in the Smooth Criminal segment and young Michael in Badder. His performance earned him a Young Artist Award, giving the young actor an impressive foundation for what followed. His career soon expanded dramatically. Adams starred as Fool in Wes Craven's The People Under the Stairs, played Jesse Hall in the first 2 Mighty Ducks films, and became Kenny Den Nunez in the beloved 1993 baseball movie The Sandlot. He also appeared on prominent black television series including A Different World, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Martin Moesha, and Sister Sister. Then his visibility declined. Unlike some former child stars, Adams did not become the center of a highly publicized collapse. Instead, mainstream audiences simply saw less of him. That makes his story particularly appropriate for a video about young black performers who faded from Hollywood's brightest spotlight. Importantly, however, he did not literally disappear. Adams has spoken about spending much of his youth working and missing ordinary childhood experiences. He also pursued music and later returned to creative projects. His story therefore should not be presented as tragedy when the evidence supports something more nuanced. Brandon Quintin Adams had already accumulated a remarkable resume before reaching adulthood. The real mystery is why an actor familiar from Moonwalker, The Mighty Ducks, The People Under the Stairs, and The Sandlot never became the major adult Hollywood star his childhood success seemed to predict. Danielle Spencer. Danielle Spencer was only a child when audiences fell in love with her sharp delivery and unforgettable presence as Dee Thomas on What's Happening. Yet while television viewers saw a confident young comedian, Spencer's life away from the studio would soon take a devastating turn. In 1977, during the run of the popular sitcom, Spencer was involved in a serious automobile accident. Her stepfather actor, Tim Pelt, died while Spencer suffered major injuries. She eventually returned to What's Happening, demonstrating remarkable determination while still dealing with the consequences of an experience no child should have had to endure. But unlike many young performers who spent adulthood chasing another hit television series, Spencer eventually chose an entirely different future. She pursued education and became a veterinarian, building a professional identity far removed from Hollywood. That career change is crucial to understanding why she seemed to disappear. She was not simply an actress abandoned by the entertainment industry. She became a highly educated professional whose life extended well beyond acting. Years later, however, health challenges returned. Spencer underwent surgery related to spinal problems and publicly faced significant medical difficulties. In 2014, she was inducted into the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture in recognition of her place in television history. Then came another difficult battle: breast cancer. Spencer publicly discussed her diagnosis and treatment, adding another chapter to a life already marked by extraordinary resilience. Danielle Spencer died on August 11, 2025 at age 60. For generations who remember Dee's famous attitude on What's Happening, her story deserves more than the familiar forgotten child star label. Hollywood may have stopped being the center of her life, but Spencer did not simply vanish. She transformed herself from child actress to veterinarian and built a second identity that television fame could never completely define. Emmanuel Lewis. In the 1980s, few child stars were as instantly recognizable as Emmanuel Lewis. With his bright smile, distinctive voice, and unusually small stature, Lewis became the face of Webster, the ABC sitcom that premiered in 1983. Practically overnight, he went from young performer to television celebrity. As Webster Long, the adopted son of George and Catherine Papadopoulos, Lewis became the emotional center of the series. Webster ran for 6 seasons, ending in 1989, giving Lewis something rare for a child actor: years of sustained national exposure. His popularity extended beyond America, and his friendship with Michael Jackson generated additional media attention during the height of Jackson's global fame. But after Webster, Lewis never duplicated that level of television success. And this is where accuracy becomes particularly important. Stories online have repeatedly attempted to explain Lewis's height through dramatic medical claims. The transcript behind this video goes even further, claiming that he suffered from a severe growth hormone deficiency that damaged his nervous system and internal organs. Those claims should not be presented as established fact without reliable medical documentation. Lewis himself is a living person, and speculation about private health conditions should not replace evidence. What can be documented is that his acting appearances became much less frequent after Webster. Lewis also pursued education, attending Clark Atlanta University while occasionally returning for television appearances and projects. As of 2026, Emmanuel Lewis is 55 years old. His story therefore differs sharply from the tragic narrative often attached to former child celebrities. There was no documented catastrophic Hollywood downfall necessary to explain his lower profile. Instead, Lewis represents something quieter and perhaps more common. A child becomes enormously famous because one role perfectly matches one moment in television history. The series ends, audiences grow older, Hollywood changes, and suddenly that familiar face appears far less often. But for anyone who watched 1980s television, one word can still bring the memories rushing back: Webster. Todd Bridges. Todd Bridges became famous at an age when most children were still discovering who they wanted to be. Born in San Francisco in 1965, he began acting professionally as a boy and appeared in Fish before landing the role that would define his youth. In 1978, at just 13, Bridges became Willis Jackson on Different Strokes, playing the older brother of Gary Coleman's Arnold. For years, millions of Americans watched him grow up on television. But when Different Strokes ended in 1986, adulthood brought a dramatically different reality. Bridges struggled with substance abuse, and repeated legal troubles increasingly overshadowed his acting career. In 1989, he faced an attempted murder charge connected to the shooting of a drug dealer in Los Angeles. Bridges maintained his innocence and was ultimately acquitted. His story could easily have ended as another tragedy associated with childhood fame. Instead, Bridges eventually achieved sobriety and began rebuilding his life. In his 2010 memoir, Killing Willis: From Different Strokes to the Mean Streets to the Life I Always Wanted, he openly examined addiction, childhood experiences, fame, and his long struggle to separate Todd Bridges, the man, from Willis Jackson, the character. Bridges later returned to television through acting, reality programs, interviews, and other appearances. So saying that he permanently vanished from Hollywood would be inaccurate. What disappeared was the extraordinary level of fame he experienced as a teenager. For longtime viewers, that distinction makes his journey even more powerful. Todd Bridges survived an era that produced several painful child star stories and lived long enough to tell his own version. His life reminds us that falling out of Hollywood's spotlight does not always mean the final chapter has been written. Billy Buckwheat Thomas. Billy Thomas became recognizable to millions before he was old enough to understand what celebrity might eventually mean. Born William Thomas Jr. in Los Angeles in 1931, he joined the Our Gang comedy shorts as a small child and became permanently associated with Buckwheat, one of the series' most recognizable characters. Thomas worked during an era when black performers faced severe restrictions in American entertainment. Racial stereotypes present in early Hollywood cannot be ignored yet. Our Gang was notable for regularly placing black and white children together on screen. Thomas appeared in dozens of shorts, and his childhood image survived through theatrical re-releases and decades of television broadcasts. But growing older changed everything. Thomas did not transition into a major adult acting career. After serving in the US Army during the Korean War era, he eventually returned to the movie business in a completely different capacity. Instead of standing before the camera, Thomas worked behind the scenes as a film laboratory technician at Technicolor. That reality is compelling enough without the unsupported scenes found in the original transcript. Claims that co-workers cruelly mocked him or elaborate descriptions of his final moments should not be presented as documented history without reliable evidence. Thomas died in Los Angeles in October 1980 at only 49 years old. His acting career had ended decades earlier, but Buckwheat remained alive in American popular culture. There is something deeply bittersweet about that contrast. Audiences continued watching the smiling child preserved forever on film, while the adult Billy Thomas lived largely outside celebrity. Hollywood remembered Buckwheat far longer than it remembered Billy Thomas, and perhaps that is the most haunting part of his story. Mark Kopage. Mark Kopage entered television history in 1968 when he became Corey Baker on Julia. Still a young boy, Kopage played the son of Diahann Carroll's title character, a widowed nurse raising her child after her husband's death. At a time when American television offered relatively few multidimensional black families, Julia represented an important cultural milestone. Born in Los Angeles in 1962, Kopage essentially grew up before a national audience. Julia ran from 1968 to 1971, and Carroll's groundbreaking visibility naturally placed her young television son in the spotlight as well. For several formative years, Kopage possessed something countless aspiring actors wanted: national recognition. But when the program ended, that visibility did not automatically translate into permanent Hollywood stardom. Kopech continued accumulating credits, yet he never again experienced the same mainstream prominence he had known as Corey. As adulthood arrived, his name gradually became less familiar to general audiences. That makes his story relevant to black child stars, who faded from Hollywood's brightest spotlight, but it is important not to exaggerate what happened. The original transcript depicts Kopech sleeping in his car, desperately searching for work and being completely abandoned by Hollywood. Without strong documentation, those dramatic details should not be repeated as established facts. The more meaningful story concerns the uncertainty of childhood fame itself. A child can become recognizable across America before understanding the entertainment business, only to discover years later that recognition provides no guarantee of adult success. Today, Julia remains an important chapter in black television history, and Kopech remains permanently connected to it. Mark Kopech may have faded from mainstream celebrity, but Corey Baker was never completely erased. Every rediscovery of Julia introduces another generation to the young actor who helped represent a changing image of black family life on American television. Shavar Ross. Shavar Ross became part of one of television's most recognizable child star ensembles when he joined Diff'rent Strokes as Dudley Ramsey, Arnold Jackson's close friend. Born in 1971, Ross entered professional acting at a young age and became a familiar presence on the enormously popular sitcom during the early 1980s. Dudley is particularly remembered because of the controversial two-part episode The Bicycle Man. The storyline involved a child predator targeting Dudley and Arnold and was unusually serious for a mainstream family sitcom of that period. Decades later, those episodes remain among the most discussed installments of Diff'rent Strokes because they attempted to warn families about child sexual abuse. Accuracy becomes especially important here. The original transcript claims Ross himself had suffered abuse before filming those scenes and was effectively reliving his personal trauma on camera. Such a sensitive assertion should never be repeated as fact without reliable first-person or authoritative documentation. His performance remains powerful without attaching an unverified personal tragedy to it. Ross continued acting after Diff'rent Strokes. His credits included Punky Brewster, Family Matters, and Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning. As he grew older, however, acting became less central to his public identity. He eventually expanded into filmmaking, writing, digital media, and Christian ministry. Rather than being mysteriously erased by Hollywood, Ross built an adult life in which mainstream acting no longer occupied the position it once had. That distinction matters. Not every child star who disappears from primetime television has suffered a secret downfall. For audiences who remember Dudley Shavar, Ross remains connected to an extraordinary era of television childhood fame. His journey reminds us that sometimes leaving the spotlight is not an ending, it is simply choosing another stage. Matthew "Stymie" Beard. Matthew Beard was making Americans laugh during the Great Depression, decades before television transformed child actors into household celebrities. Born in Los Angeles in 1925, Beard became famous as Stymie in the Our Gang comedy shorts while still very young. His bowler hat, expressive face, and natural screen presence made Stymie one of the franchise's memorable characters. Beard's career cannot be separated from the racial realities of early Hollywood. Opportunities for black performers were severely restricted, while stereotypes remained embedded throughout popular entertainment. Even within those limitations, Beard achieved sustained visibility as a black child performer in one of America's best-known comedy series. Yet childhood recognition did not guarantee an easy adulthood. After leaving Our Gang, Beard struggled for years with heroin addiction and spent a long period away from mainstream entertainment. The contrast was striking. Stymie continued appearing on screens through reruns, while the actor behind him faced difficulties far removed from the laughter of his childhood performances. But Beard's story did not end there. He eventually overcame his addiction and returned to acting during the 1970s, appearing on television programs including Sanford and Son, The Jeffersons, and Good Times. That comeback is important because portraying his entire adult life as abandonment would erase one of its most meaningful chapters. Beard suffered a stroke shortly before his death and died on January 8, 1981, at age 56. By then, generations had encountered Stymie through Our Gang and its later television incarnation, The Little Rascals. Like many former child performers, Beard experienced a strange form of immortality. Audiences could endlessly replay the boy he once was. But Matthew Beard was far more than Stymie. His struggles were real, yet so was his recovery, and the fact that he found his way back to the screen deserves to be remembered too. Rodney Allen Rippey. Rodney Allen Rippey became famous before he was old enough to fully understand what fame meant. Born in Long Beach, California in 1968, he was only about 3 years old when a series of Jack in the Box commercials turned him into one of the most recognizable black child personalities of the early 1970s. With his natural charm and memorable appearances alongside the chain's oversized hamburgers, Rippey quickly became far more than an advertising face. His sudden popularity opened doors across entertainment. Rippey appeared on programs including The Tonight Show, starring Johnny Carson, The Odd Couple, The $6 Million Man, and Police Story. He even entered the recording business, releasing the album Take Life a Little Easier in 1974. For a brief period, his face seemed to be everywhere. But childhood celebrity proved temporary. As Rippey grew older, Hollywood's intense interest faded. The original transcript claims he earned more than $1 million as a child, but discovered only about $5,000 remained when he became an adult. That precise financial story should not be repeated as fact without reliable documentation. His decline in mainstream visibility, however, is clear. Rather than allowing childhood fame to define his entire life, Rippey pursued education and other professional interests. He attended California State University, Dominguez Hills, and remained connected to entertainment, media business, and community activities without ever returning to the extraordinary celebrity he experienced as a small child. That is what makes his story so revealing. Rodney Allen Rippey did not need a sensational downfall to disappear from Hollywood's brightest spotlight. Sometimes the industry simply moves on as its child performers grow up. Millions once recognized his smile instantly. Decades later, many viewers remember the commercials more clearly than the child who starred in them, a striking example of how quickly childhood fame can become nostalgia. Ross Bagley. For millions who grew up watching 1990s television, Ross Bagley will forever be remembered as Little Nicky Banks on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Born in Wisconsin in 1988, Bagley entered entertainment at a remarkably young age and quickly found himself working alongside some of the decade's most recognizable black stars. Before joining the Banks family, Bagley appeared as Buckwheat in the 1994 feature film adaptation of The Little Rascals. That same year, he joined The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air as Nicholas "Nicky" Banks, the youngest member of the family. His natural comic presence made him an instantly familiar face during the sitcom's final seasons. Bagley's connection with Will Smith continued beyond television. In 1996, he appeared in the blockbuster Independence Day playing Dylan, the son of Vivica A. Fox's character. The film became one of the biggest commercial successes of the year. For a child actor, appearing in a hit sitcom and a massive Hollywood blockbuster within such a short period suggested an enormous future, but that expected trajectory never materialized. Bagley accumulated several additional credits while young, then gradually withdrew from acting. Unlike many former child stars featured in sensational retrospectives, there is no need to invent addiction, financial ruin, or secret tragedy to explain his absence. Available accounts indicate that he simply moved toward a life outside regular Hollywood performance. As an adult, Bagley pursued education and professional interest beyond acting. He also participated in the 2020 Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion, allowing longtime viewers to see the grown man behind the child they remembered. Ross Bagley therefore fits this story in a very particular way. He did not vanish because Hollywood destroyed him. He left behind a surprisingly compact acting career containing two enormous pieces of 1990s popular culture. Sometimes disappearing from Hollywood is not a tragedy. Sometimes it means choosing a life where the camera no longer decides who you are. Erin Blunt. Erin Blunt represents an earlier generation of black child performers whose names may be unfamiliar today, even though their faces once appeared in successful Hollywood films. Born in 1963, Blunt became widely known while still a boy through the role of Ahmad Abdul-Rahim in the 1976 baseball comedy The Bad News Bears. The film starring Walter Matthau and Tatum O'Neal became a major success and developed a lasting reputation as one of the defining youth sports movies of the 1970s. Blunt's Ahmad was a memorable member of the Bears, and he returned for the sequels, The Bad News Bears, in Breaking Training in 1977 and The Bad News Bears Go to Japan in 1978. For a young black actor appearing in 3 films from a recognizable Hollywood franchise before adulthood was a significant achievement. Yet unlike some of his young co-stars, Blunt did not turn that early exposure into decades of mainstream screen fame. His acting credits became limited, and eventually he largely disappeared from Hollywood's public spotlight. That makes him an especially interesting fit for this list. There is no widely documented spectacular collapse scandal or dramatic incident that explains why audiences stopped seeing him regularly, and that absence of scandal is important. The entertainment industry has a habit of encouraging audiences to assume that every child star who leaves acting must have experienced tragedy. Blunt's story reminds us that the truth can be much quieter. A young performer can appear in successful movies, grow older, and simply follow a path that no longer keeps him in front of millions of viewers. Today, The Bad News Bears remains far better known than many of the children who helped make it successful. For viewers revisiting those films, seeing Ahmad again may produce an immediate question: whatever happened to Erin Blunt? That question alone explains why he belongs in a retrospective about black child stars who faded from Hollywood. Stephen Perry. Stephen Perry occupies a fascinating place in black cinema history because his most important screen appearance came in a film that remains culturally significant more than 6 decades later. As a young performer, Perry played Travis Younger in the 1961 film adaptation of Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun. That meant sharing the screen with an extraordinary cast that included Sidney Poitier, Ruby Dee, Claudia McNeil, and Diana Sands. Perry portrayed the young son of Walter Lee and Ruth Younger, placing him at the emotional center of a story about a black family confronting racism, financial pressure, generational conflict, and dreams of a better future. A Raisin in the Sun endured. Perry's Hollywood career did not develop in the same way. His later screen presence became extremely limited, and his name largely disappeared from mainstream entertainment conversation. This contrast makes him relevant to a story about black child performers whose early exposure did not lead to lasting Hollywood fame. Audiences can still watch young Travis Younger today, even while knowing comparatively little about the actor's later life. Here, however, accuracy is especially important. The original transcript introduces a dramatic story claiming Perry suffered a devastating automobile accident that caused permanent facial disfigurement. Crucially, the transcript itself describes that story as unverified. It should therefore be removed entirely rather than repeated as biography. There is no reason to manufacture tragedy when the documented contrast is already compelling. Stephen Perry appeared as a child beside some of the most important black actors of his era in a film that became an American classic. Then his presence in Hollywood largely faded. More than 60 years later, A Raisin in the Sun continues introducing audiences to Travis Younger. And each time it does, Stephen Perry's childhood performance quietly returns to the screen, even if the actor himself never became the household name that history made of several of his celebrated co-stars. Hollywood made them famous before many of them were old enough to understand what fame could cost. From Gary Coleman and Jamie Foxworth to Ralph Carter, Emmanuel Lewis, and the forgotten faces of earlier generations, these black child stars left memories that survived long after the cameras moved on. Some struggled, some chose different paths, and others simply discovered that childhood success offered no guarantee of adult stardom. But here's the question: did Hollywood truly forget these young performers, or have audiences forgotten them too quickly? Which story surprised you the most, and which black child star do you believe deserved a bigger career? Share your opinion in the comments. And if these stories deserve to be remembered, subscribe to Golden Black Legends, where yesterday's stars are never truly forgotten.